Oh boy, welcome in to the final day after podcast of the 2023 football season. We are, of course, sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt, JohnnyT-Shirt.com. I am Tommy Ashley. As always, that is Buck Sanders, and that is Jason Staples. Jason getting creeped up on by Not a Christmas Movie. Die Hard. Buck, I'll come to you first. I think we need to set some ground rules on this podcast today because there's a lot to talk about and there's a lot not to talk about. So I'm going to let you set the table as we follow the boss man into the abyss here on the day after.
Well, this podcast is not about the season, the entire season. Although some things about the past season we won't be able to avoid talking about. But and as probably anticipated by most of the people that are tuning in, we expect there to be some changes in the off season, but we're not expecting a change from Mac Brown, and that might be the big downer of the whole show, but it is what it is, and whether you're pro or against, that's really not a subject that's on the table for us here today. We're going to be talking about this game, what it means, and this is a unique game. I mean, we will never see this UNC team again, and we have never saw them before last night with Connor Harrell at quarterback, other people not participating, Sid Gray not there, and in the spring, we're going to see a completely different UNC team as well. So I wouldn't count on getting too much knowledge from what we saw last night, although I think there are some things we can take away from it. But we're not going to satisfy everybody's desire for their pitchfork and torches this morning. We're just going to talk about this game and what we feel like we learned from it, if anything.
I agree with that. Jason, get you in here. Let's talk about specifically the game to start with. I thought, well, I'll let you just go because I have some thoughts and adhering to I'm not going to stand up here and rip everybody unmercifully yet. Y'all might get me worked up and I start doing it. But Jason, this North Carolina game.
Yet being the operative word, Tommy.
Yes, yet. It takes me a while to get ramped up. I'm on like day 30 of fighting this head cold, and I'm sick of it. So, but once the juices get flowing, who knows what'll come out, literally. Jason, I saw a game that looks very familiar to, quite frankly, the past several years, but definitely very familiar to the last half of 2023 last night.
The last half of each season for the last few years, basically. And first I do want to say something up front that Connor Harrell looked pretty good for the most part. There were some promising signs from him. I did say, you remember, I did mention in the game plan that the real concern there was going to be turnovers. And there were a couple really big ones, and that's something that he's going to have to figure out. He's going to have to address. Is he played really? I mean, you look at the numbers: 18 to 27, 60. So it's 67% completion percentage. That's not bad. And then 11.1 yards per completion. I'm got to find the per attempt here. But those are pretty solid numbers. This and I thought he looked good as a runner. I mean, you look at the dimension that he brought to the table as a dynamic runner. Really pleased with what you got there, I think, and you feel like with Max Johnson and him, you've got the quarterback position in decent shape going into next year. Now he does need to wear some ASO ankle braces or tape his ankles or something. You just take too much contact at this level not to have your ankles protected a little bit. I don't know why he likes to go full unprotected there, but we saw him impacted later in the game after he kind of jammed that ankle on that one run. But I thought he played pretty well. I thought almost everything else was not so good. I mean, I figure I probably ought to start, other than the comment about Harrell, start with this. I'm going to go back to North Carolina still is not a line of scrimmage program. And what they've got to figure out in this offseason is what they need to do to become more of a line of scrimmage program. Because this is yet another example of a game against a team, and actually there's some commonalities too, as well as with West Virginia runs an odd front defense. They play a lot of three-man stuff. It's similar, actually, in a lot of ways. The structure is similar to what Tony Gibson runs at NC State. Carolina has had a lot of trouble against three-man, 3-3 stack type defenses the past 3 years, 4 years. They've really struggled anytime they've faced that kind of defensive line or that kind of defensive structure, and they've struggled every time they've played a quality or even competent defensive line the last few years. And they've struggled when they've played teams that have good offensive lines because their defensive line gets pushed around. So the real problem, the thing that needs to be solved, Mac talks about what do you need to do to get over the hump? Well, I'd love to be his advisor right now because I think there's one real clear thing that you got to do to get over the hump. And, I think initially Mac felt like when he got to Carolina, the thing was recruit better players on the defensive line in particular, and that's it. But it's not just a recruiting thing. It's a mentality thing on the line of scrimmage. If you're going to get over the hump, you have to get better players on the line of scrimmage, yes, but you've got to change the mentality of the program, particularly on the line of scrimmage, or that hump's never going to be gotten over.
I agree with that. And I was saying during the game, this is not a talent thing. This is we talk about culture, we talk about intensity. West Virginia, Buck, I'm going to go here. We talked about Connor Harrell, and I thought he looked good until he hurt his ankle. And then it's kind of like a gazelle on the Savannah, Sahara, African plains, wherever. Once you have a bad leg and you have all these guys chasing you, and it goes to my point, the offensive line, Buck, was atrocious yesterday. With a month to prepare for this game, and Jason talks about the odd fronts and all that, but, geez, I didn't see anybody blocking anybody, Buck, and that, for me, was the most concerning thing of the entire game. You got 5th and 6th guys that still can't block. And people say play the younger guys. Well, they ain't any better.
Playing.
Yeah. So, Buck, just speak to that aspect of it. I thought Connor Harrell had a valiant effort playing behind a line that showed nothing, period, that I saw.
Well,
and I'm not indicting the players themselves, but
I've got about 3 comments about all of that. One is the toughness part of it and the culture part of it. That they brought in an offensive line coach is probably one of the toughest in the nation. I mean, it's maybe where he got those players at, where he found them in the stage of their career. They were all basically seniors or graduate seniors. Made a difference, but Randy Clements, a part of what he feels like is his duty as a offensive line coach is to instill toughness into his players. It's not just all technique and if the defender does this, you do that, you zig when they zag, whatever. It's not all that. Part of his coaching goals are to make people tougher. So I don't think it's a coaching issue. unless it was just he's trying to overcome some poor habits these players developed under former coaches. Maybe that had something to do with it. The second thing is once North Carolina fell behind in a big way, that's when the sacks ratcheted up, which is not uncommon. That's a fairly predictable phenomenon. If you're far enough behind that you virtually have to toss it up every single time you snap the ball, then the defense, they don't have to think about what they're going to do next. They already know at the snap of the ball where they're going. And that the stats bear that out. I mean, you could see it on the field. But there were 7 sacks overall. 5 of them came in the second half, 2 in the first half. So those sacks began to accumulate, and it became more difficult to block those guys the more they fell behind. Because you knew what Connor Harrell was going to do. Plus, at that stage of the game, he wasn't very mobile either. So you take away some of his mobility, you know he's got to throw the ball. That's a recipe for disaster. And I'm not trying to defend the offensive line. I'm just saying that there are factors in play that you just can't describe based on, you just can't explain based on the schemes or the players or any of that. There are other elements at work there. So that's how I would explain it. And North Carolina actually rushed the ball pretty well in this game, but that's a different topic. So
let's talk about let's talk about the game plan, Jason. Specifically on offense, I thought it was a little weird, a little bit. The Wildcat reared its head, or whatever, direct snap to Hampton. Not sure I like that. Lampkin struggled a couple with the snaps, which is understandable. But what got me is the announcers kept saying his first game is center. He played center at Coastal, so he wasn't like brought in a guy that never played position. But just sort of speak to what you saw as far as Lindsey's approach in this game, Jason. I didn't like it, but you're better at it than I am. Go.
Yeah, I was indifferent toward it. I think the general approach was that he felt he needed to add some window dressing here and there to be able to run the football a little better. I think they knew that they probably weren't going to be able to block this front as well as what they'd like, and they were trying in certain cases to give different looks and just find ways to manufacture some yards here and there. But I agree, the direct snap stuff I think was ill-conceived, partly because, I think Lampkin is not as good a snapper as what Gaynor had. And I think we did see in this game how valuable Gaynor has been to the offense the last 2 years. If nothing else, I mean, we already knew how valuable Drake May had been, right? But this game, I thought, showed how valuable Corey Gaynor had been. This was a real indication of that. So you already know, though, that the guy that's snapping isn't quite as good a snapper, not quite as reliable. It's harder for backs to catch the snap than quarterbacks who, do it 150, 200, 300, 500 times a day. So that makes it trickier for that. So I'm not really excited about that. And then the other thing is, if you've got a quarterback who's as dynamic and as fast as Harrell is, I think you want him involved in the exchange just for the window dressing more on the other end anyway. So I think the direct snap does you less good there. But I mean, they only did it 4 or 5 times, so I'm not really. I don't think that's a deal on the game. I think the rest of the game plan was fine. I mean, I don't think it was a problem. I don't think it was anything special. I think it was really the issue is that no game plan is going to look really good when you can't block on the interior of the offensive line. when your center and both guards are struggling, well, I mean, what game plan do you have ready for that? I mean, they gave up a lot of interior pressure, and they were not able to get some of the running lanes for Omarion Hampton that he'd had most of the season. So that changes a lot of your outlook. And I thought their use of Harrell's legs until he got dinged up was the right approach, and it gave them a lot to offer. They were able to move the football. I mean, you look at the numbers, and the numbers are okay. 5.2 yards a play is not great, but it's not terrible. You look at the in the first half, they were at 5.8 yards per play. Second half, just a little bit under that. So, I don't have major problems with the scheme or with the approach offensively. I do think that Harrell's injury or his getting dinged up in terms of his ankle impacted them, and I think some of his limitations as a thrower impact them in that context, because he's still getting comfortable and still. You could see a lot of the difference between him and, say, a Drake May, which, as we talked about, it's unfair to make that comparison for just about anybody. But there were a lot of places where he put the ball in the frame, sort of his receiver, within the catch radius, I'll say. But receivers having to go up and catch the ball, or reach and catch the ball, or stop and slow down and there's a lot of missing within the strike zone that reduces your yards after the catch. It's just that sort of thing where that's where the limitations are as much as anything for him right now, is just missing by a little bit. I mean, even the interception in the end zone is one of those where if you put that ball right on target, it's touchdown. But that's a really tight window throw, and those tight window throws right now, he's not quite there. He's developing, he's still getting better, but that's where the limitations are. And so if you got a guy who's not real comfortable with those tight window throws, who then gets his ankle dinged up, and you're having trouble blocking on the interior, it's going to be a long night. You're going to have trouble finding solutions schematically, especially when you add 3 turnovers into that too. It just, you're not going to score a bunch of points in that context. So again, it comes back to the primary schematic difference is block better up front.
Yep. Line of scrimmage game, it comes to Garrett Chapman in the chats. They dominated time of possession. West Virginia had the 2 big plays, and Carolina got nothing in the red zone. The interception was a big one. You'd like to think if that's a Nesbitt or something, that's a touchdown. It was interesting that they talked all week or all month about not having any tight ends, and then they used young Deems May a lot in this game, and I didn't think that would happen, but it was an interesting approach. Buck, as far as the offensive side, let's stay here a little bit longer.
Time of possession doesn't matter.
Well,
just going to say, never pay attention to time of possession. It doesn't matter.
I know, but I just put the chat up there.
I'm just saying.
It doesn't matter, especially when you score on the first play of the game and you have a punt return. And Buck, but I do want to go to special teams, but staying on the offense, I thought the wide receivers showed some things. I thought Gavin Blackwell, J.J. Jones, a lot of people said they need a wide receiver in the portal. I don't necessarily think so. Nate McCullum made some good catches and got back in it. Just give me some positives from the offense that can carry forward going into next season, because quite frankly, this was an exhibition for next season. It matters. It matters a lot for the players that were playing in the game. But as far as the program itself, what did you see that translates maybe into the spring and on into 2024?
Well, I saw Nate McCollum not drop a ball at all. He targeted 5 times. He caught 5 balls. And on that one longer catch of his, he had to adjust to the ball in the air in order to come down with it, sort of what Jason was talking about. Funny how Drake May could hit him right in his hands and he could drop it, but he could make an aerobatic catch in the air to pull down a ball that was, 2-3 yards off the target. So
Well,
anyway,
it makes a big difference being healthy, doesn't it?
it does apparently.
Yeah.
So Nate was good, and he's a good piece of what they want to do next year for sure. I assume in the wide receiver room. I thought Hamilton showed some things, but again, had Drake May been throwing the ball, I think Hamilton would have made a bigger showing. Because I think he's the kind of receiver that is appreciates the ball easily within his catch radius more so than not. So, but in any event, the offense I think did show some nice things. I think one thing you did touch on a little bit is that both in receptions and in blocking, they missed the tight end room that they've had for the majority of this season. No Copenhaver, no Nesbitt, no Morales. That's a big adjustment for the offense, and that came into play on their blocking on the offensive line and in their ability to catch the ball. I think I have it correct when the offense went 72 snaps last night. They only had 40 of those snaps, 40 out of the 72 was Deems May in the game. They went without a tight end at all for those plays. I think someone said, obviously, I didn't notice this during the game, but somebody with better eyes than me noticed that Jonathan Adorner lined up at tight end at times last night. So, or whether you call that a tight end or whether you call that a unbalanced offensive line, whatever you want to call it, Adorno was in on probably almost half the snaps maybe as a tight end. So that's one less target, so to speak, that Connor Harrell had. That's why I talk about this game in terms of, especially on offense, I think more so than on defense. The number of pieces missing from the puzzle, Corey Gaynor, the tight end room, Drake May, Tez Walker, you take those players out of the equation and you're looking at a football team we hadn't seen this entire year. It's a completely different team without those players on the field. And it'll be a completely different team on the field next year, even in the spring game, when Max Johnson and Jake Johnson are here and they're doing their thing and what have you. Yes, it was UNC playing football last night, but it was not the same team that we've seen this entire year, and it's not a team we'll ever see again. That's why this game doesn't fold easily into a data point as far as the continuity of the team or what's going to happen next. So I think that's part of the problem about talking about the offense in this context.
Valid point. And I saw Southern Cal look pretty good without Caleb Williams in a couple pieces, which goes back to the coaching aspect of it, of scheming up something. But Jason, final thought on the offense. Somebody in the chat asked earlier, and I saw somebody on Twitter and maybe on the message boards, there's going to be a quarterback competition in Chapel Hill for the first time legitimately in a long time with Max Johnson coming in and Connor Harrell. Just from your tape review of Max Johnson and what you saw from Connor Harrell, how big a thing is that going to be this spring?
I mean, I think it's going to be legitimate. I'm not going to say that it's a 100% chance that who's going to be the starter, but I would be surprised if at the end of it all, Max Johnson isn't taking the first snap of next season. That said, I do think what you saw from Harrell is a guy that, maybe you have some packages for. He's a guy that, you put him in there in certain goal line situations and certain, look at what Kansas has done. Kansas at different points has gone two quarterbacks on the field at different points to allow them some flexibility in causing headaches for the defense. You've got one quarterback who's really mobile, and you can do some really interesting things. I mean, they'll do a handoff to a rollout kind of stuff. I would be, if I'm Carolina looking at what I have in Harrell, I would be, even if he's not going to be the guy, I'd be looking at how I can use him a little bit next year. And the other thing is, Max Johnson behind that offensive line, how many games is he going to play before he gets hurt? Let's be honest. So, you're going to have two quarterbacks ready next year no matter what. And, the hope is that the offensive line doesn't look like that next year, but they've got to find some players, and they've got to figure out how to change the mentality enough to be more competent on the offensive line going into next year. So, and we've said that how many years in a row? We've said that a lot of years in a row, and that's despite Carolina having a more than the normal amount of NFL talent on the offensive line. I mean, how many guys from the last 5 years are still on NFL rosters, at least practice rosters, but a number of these guys actually, starting or in rotations on NFL rosters. I mean, Josh Azudu, you've got, about 4 guys maybe from the last 3 years that are still in the NFL. If you've got that, and then you've still been as bad on the offensive line with the personnel that you've had, if you've still been that bad for the last 4 years, you got to figure out what's at root there. And that, to me, like I said, you're going to need 2 quarterbacks to play no matter what. And yeah, that's the thing. Now, I do think Jake Johnson helps a lot, because he's a tight end who can mash you, and is a big time blocker, and also is a target that's really hard to miss. So I do think that dimension, on top of Max, I think the Jake Johnson thing helps a lot in terms of the offense as well.
Yeah. Buck get blindsided there. If you've missed it, rewind your YouTube and watch that. But I think the offensive line issue can be helped by some continuity with coaches. I mean, they've switched multiple times, so maybe they can have some of that there. I think Blasky from Georgia can come in and help there as well. I do find it interesting that the issues have all been with basically the same guys on the field over the last 2 or 3 years. So maybe coaching some stuff out of guys, or being able to mold younger guys that didn't have the other coaching in them, perhaps, is the thing.
The real thing on the defensive side is they need coaching.
We're going to the defensive side after the break, and this is where we get loose. It's Johnny T-Shirt, JohnnyT-Shirt.com, sponsors of this podcast. Go check them out. It is after Christmas. It's after Christmas, but they still got stuff. And they still have gear that you can get with all your Christmas money. Jason did not opt out of that Johnny T-Shirt ad. So go see them on Franklin Street. Order online. They'll get you the gear to your house. There's plenty of time for winter. I think it's supposed to get colder. They've got the sweatshirts, the hoodies, all that kind of stuff. They've got the NIL merchandise. And they probably got a dog collar and some dog leashes and dog tags and things like that Buck could use at times. But it is a great place to get all your stuff. Johnny T-Shirt, they're great friends, alumni owned and operated. Check them out. And you get 10% off if you're an Inside Carolina Premium subscriber. National guys pay the bills. It's the day after. Shout out to the 436 currently in the room. Let's get it up to 600 or 700 by the time we finish around the block. Okay, guys, let's flip sides of the ball. We've got three sides of the ball to talk about here, but we're going defense. But I thought the defense showed some things. I thought Rucker, I tweeted it, and I believe it. If Rucker doesn't get held, he's a menace to deal with. It's tough when you get held. They called some holds that I didn't see called all year. But once again, the defense, when they need to get stops, they can't get off the field. Let's talk good, bad, and ugly. I thought there's some good out there. I thought Caleb Cost. I knew it wouldn't take long for the how in the hell is Caleb Cost hadn't been playing all year comments to come out. But just speak to what you saw from him and the positives on the defensive side.
Caleb Cost, he played well overall, but he also delivered one of the biggest hits we saw from anybody in the secondary. Maybe Elijah Huzzy had one or two, and some of the other guys. but he just blasted some guy out there last night, and he looks like he's very competent, very physical. Um, I don't know that the competition at the star position, which is where I see him, and where he played last night, for next year, I don't know that that's decided. I think they have good depth there, with Boykin and with Cost, and the guy they brought in from NC State could also probably play there. He might more likely be a box safety, but he could play that position, I think, if they needed him to. So it looks like they're going to have some depth there next year. So that's a good thing. And Cost is a player. I didn't see as much from Amari Campbell as I expected to see, although he had his moments. And the rest of it, in my column that'll come out at some point after this, I was afraid to mention any, and I got choked up trying to do it, any positives from the defense. But the things that we look at a lot to determine how well a defense is played are things like third down conversions. And Tommy, you just spoke to it and said that the defense couldn't get off the field. West Virginia only converted 4 third down attempts last night out of 13 tries. That's really good. You would take that every single game if you could get 9 stops out of 13 first down attempts. In the red zone, I thought they played about as well as I've seen them all year. West Virginia had 4 trips into the red zone and came out with 1 touchdown. 3 out of 4 of their red zone attempts went for field goals. Now, normally a decent defensive performance doesn't start out by giving up a 70-yard play on the first snap of the game. 11 seconds into the game, they've already given up 75 yards. The rest of the game, they gave up 304 yards. And if you think back to the narrative that everybody had of this particular game, is they were worried to death that West Virginia was going to do to North Carolina what Baylor did to North Carolina in 2015. And they didn't. They didn't run the ball that well against North Carolina. They had a few big runs that artificially inflates their yards per carry average, but overall, North Carolina got people on the ground after the line of scrimmage, not pretty much very often after only a short gain. So now that's kind of in some ways saying, like, other than the shooting, Mrs. Lincoln, how'd you enjoy the play? But to say that this defense just did not play well or did not show any improvement, I think is not looking at all the facts. There are some things there, some players there to build around for next year. And now I'm also not telling anybody to back off of any plans they're making for coaching changes on that side of the ball, or on any side of the ball, really, for UNC. But there were some certain things about the defense that you can take from this game and build on. And you also have to take into consideration how many bad spots they were put into. Through special teams play, they gave up a short field on the special teams fumble when the ball bounced off a guy's leg, and they gave up a short field on another occasion when they went for it on 4th down, like from the 20-yard line or something crazy like that, late in the game. So the North Carolina defense was put in a lot of tough spots and I think they acquitted themselves pretty well. And it was heartwarming to me to see some guys out there playing hard that actually didn't have to play in this game at all. So, and now Jason may have a different opinion than mine, but I don't think the defense played a 30-point game last night. I thought they played much better than that, and it's a shame they didn't get rewarded for it in a lot of ways.
I agree with you. The sudden change defense was they played well. They were put in some bad positions. I think there's plenty of talent on this defense. Jason, get in here on the defensive side. You mentioned something before the break. Here we are, North Carolina's defense.
Well, it was not as bad a defensive performance as some of the ones that we've seen. I'll go with that. There was some improvement shown in certain areas. That was good. But I still look at the result here, and you say, well, you give up a 75-yarder on the first play. Let's just bracket that one and look at the rest. You can't bracket that one. The big plays really matter. And there were too many of those. I'm looking at the game on paper thing right now, and the overall success rate, you look at the EPA per rush, EPA, expected points added per, your success rate given up was actually pretty good on a down by down basis. 41% success rate given up is not bad. That's, below 50th percentile from an offense that's a good offense. From an offense that runs the football well and does things well in the success rate aspect. The problem is you give up an 11% explosive play rate. So more than 1 out of every 10 play that West Virginia had in this game was a big play. So that's still a problem. And we saw that on the first play. We saw that in several key spots where, it just, you've got to get better in those areas. But I did think that there were some encouraging signs. I mean, I thought Amari Campbell was fine. I thought he was good enough in this game that it had me going, he should have played more snaps during the season. That was one of my responses to that. One of my other responses to this game was Caleb Cost probably should have gotten more snaps during the season. I mean,
wasn't he hurt during part of the season, if I remember that right?
Yeah, I think he was. I think he was dinged early.
Point.
Yeah, but you still go, okay, well, once he's healthier, give him a little bit of a look, because he does bring a physical component, a physical presence to your defense that you need. There were some good signs with some of the guys that are going to be playing next year, but it still strikes me as a defense that the parts still look like more than what you're getting in terms of the sum.
I agree with that. But I think we saw something a little different last night than we have seen. Like even on the very first play where they gave up that 75 yards. That was a perfectly designed Jason Staples call. Show them the safeties and the corners back, and then bring somebody downhill real quickly to try to help to get to the quarterback, and they burn them on it. They rotated the safety down into the box, and got the safeties and the corners crossed up in the middle of the field, and that was 7.
Although the thing is, the safety's not supposed to come downhill there on that call. So that's one where the safety just bid on the safety's, he's got deeper than the deepest is his responsibility, and they went hard play action, and he came up hard. Stick is an aggressive guy, and his job on that play is he does not have a run fit. His job is to be deeper than the deepest and play deep middle, and they ran 2 cross country routes that you've got inside leverage, or you got outside leverage corners expecting inside help from the deep safety, and he's nowhere in the middle of the field, so you got nothing. that was actually just a cover 3 call. So, you got to have your deep safety in cover 3 or you're screwed. But I did see, a couple other calls that were absolutely the kind of thing I'd make. Caleb Koss, as well as he played, when you rush the quarterback from the nickel spot, you have to make sure that you are rushing outside in. You have to make sure that you're rushing through the upfield shoulder. You cannot come shallow. If you come shallow, he can just give you a little bit of a crossover dribble step, and all of a sudden he breaks contain, and it's a big difference. That could have been a safety on that field blitz call. It's a good call in that situation. You call the field reduction, field blitz, all of a sudden you got your safety versus 25-yard run plus a 15-yard penalty. That's a 40-yard play. 40-yard difference in just a matter of which angle you take. And that's the thing that, I keep looking at in terms of eye discipline. And I know some of these folks, drink. You hear me talk about eye discipline, but the safety coming up when he's got cover 3, middle of the field responsibility, that's eye discipline. You have a guy coming through coming to the wrong shoulder on a field blitz from the nickel position. That's not eye discipline, but that's a discipline thing. And there are just little things like that just continue to be an issue for Carolina's defense that need to be addressed. And, that's stuff that they're going to have to coach out of these guys.
Yeah. I mean, everything you said, Cost, he whiffs on that, and that's a big play. I do like his aggressiveness, and I do like that he'll hit. He is a baseball player, and I expect him to play baseball in the spring. We'll see how that all shakes out. He's a very good baseball player. We could go on and on about defensive line. We'll get into that in the postmortem podcast. It was more of the same that I saw from everybody, pretty much. I saw Jason's favorite player on skates several times with his back turned to the line. But, hey, kind of is what it is until they make some changes there. Buck, let's talk about special teams, though.
Actually, one last thing on the defensive side. I do think the speaker in the helmet helped them.
Yes. Which I did like that.
There were some times where defensively they were able to get some things. They were able to figure some things out, and you could tell that somebody was talking to him in the headset.
Power Eccles had a really good game. I guess he was the one with the speaker in his helmet.
Yeah, but, and I think one safety, I think it's 2 guys on defense. I don't know exactly what they have, but I think there were 2 guys, Power, and then one of the safeties, or maybe they had 2 safeties. I don't know what the total rule was, but with how they were getting aligned and certain things, I thought you could see a definite difference in terms of some guys being a little bit more aware where they were supposed to be and not being completely out of position after that first play. So I do think that's one of those things that does help mitigate inexperience a little bit. That does help mitigate maybe some guys who haven't fully taken on every piece of coaching onto the field, and then they're able to get coached between plays. Essentially, I think that helps.
Especially without Sid Gray out there to sort of get guys lined up. And I didn't see a ton of that yesterday with the lineup issues where Sid would have to get guys in the right spot. Buck, talk about special teams. I mean, Noah Burnett has been fantastic this year, but everything else has just been well, I guess Liam Boyd kicking off has been for the most part, has been a good thing. But everything else, good gracious. I mean, just so many undisciplined penalties, mistakes, rookie mistakes. Your thoughts there? We haven't really talked about special teams a lot. And I know Larry Porter's the coordinator, also the running back coach. Just what did you see from that position that we've missed all year that has been a problem, I think?
Well, for one thing, I'll put it this way. I'm not sure why everybody that plays North Carolina just doesn't fake the punt or the kick every single time and, go kick it on sides every single time. the ball should really never get in the air if you're the opposing team and you're playing North Carolina. I mean, to give up a first down. Now, West Virginia was in field goal range easily when they did that fake field goal attempt and got the first down. But at the same time, that allowed them to keep the ball longer. The game was pretty much over with at that point anyway, but still, that's not what you want to see happen to your special teams, right? Now, the ball hitting the guy on the leg, maybe there's something there in terms of his spacing wasn't what it should have been or something like that, but that was kind of a freakish thing. What happened on that 78-yard punt return, which shouldn't count against the defense, I couldn't tell you. I mean, it just looked
and
like
I'm going to break that one down.
That's
going to be one of our videos.
All I can see is he started out on the left and rolled to his right, and nobody was there. Everybody had left the building. At that point, he had a free run to the house. So, what they're doing there, I don't know. And people, a lot of people dog cussed Larry Fedora for a lot of different reasons. But what he did do was he made sure he had good special teams every year, by and large. So, they always heard, if there's 3 phases to the game, if you win 2 of them, you've got a chance. Well, it seems to me that North Carolina has ceded that phase of the game to their opponent in every single game they've played this year. So unless they win offense and defense, they're not going to win the game.
That is a great point. That's exactly what I was thinking when you were talking, is like special teams is one area of the game that you can pretty much win easily if you just put forth the stuff, the coaching, the effort into it. And to your point, Buck, they literally gave it away every single game, including that. Jason, talk a little bit about what your breakdown expects to see. I mean, people are cussing McGinnis, the punter. I thought the punt, other than it being a little bit of a line drive, it punted him down in the corner. You've got him pinned on the sidelines, and as soon as he turned right, I was like, that's a touchdown. Just what'd you see there? And another thing, people talked about last night in the game thread, and game threads are an adventure, I'll give them that. But people say, why don't more defensive starters play on special teams? Well, you can't talk about how many snaps defensive starters are playing and then want them on special teams as well. So that goes to that aspect of it. But, Jason, just special teams, just brutal all year.
How many block punts has Carolina given up this year?
Well, they gave up like 2 or 3 straight games.
I think they might be at 4 or 5.
Just unacceptable.
I'll just say this: if you're the guy coaching the punt team, the overall level of performance in that area, because I'm not talking, certain things in terms of the operating speed and all of that of your snapper and your punter and all that, you have certain limitations that can be in there. You don't have your punter that was there, when he got hurt. Those things matter, yes. But basic level, making sure you don't get punts blocked because of giving up, free runners into the punter, making sure the right guys are picked up and all that. That's stuff that's firing offense stuff. You get 4 or 5 punts blocked in a season and give up a couple punt return touchdowns, that sort of thing. That's the sort of thing where if you're the head coach, you've got to evaluate that guy's job. And if it's a matter of, okay, well, that guy's too good of a position coach or recruiter or whatever to get him to get rid of him as a coach, you reassign that position. You reassign the special teams coordinator role, or you reassign, and again, special teams coordinator isn't necessarily the guy that's coaching that particular unit. You figure out I don't actually know this question. I think it's Porter maybe that's coaching punts. But whoever's coaching punts,
he's overall special teams coach.
yeah. So I mean, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's the guy that's coaching that
Correct,
particular
yes.
thing. But if he is, he needs to not be. It's real simple. And you guys know me. I don't typically go out of, go after a specific coach and say that job needs to be reassigned all that often. This is one where it's pretty obvious. Like, I've coached special teams, multiple seasons of special teams myself. And with what I see, it's like, okay, look, you this has got to be reassigned. And with the punt return touchdown, it's real simple. It's one of the most basic fundamental things you drill into your players on coverage units. You never, ever, ever get behind the returner. Right? It's the same rule that you give your pass rushers. You do no good to your team if you're behind the quarterback. Right? That doesn't do you any good. So if you have 3 guys in the backfield that got great penetration and they're all behind the quarterback, you're screwed. So you coach pass rush to make sure that guys are rushing the passer in the right lane and making sure that they don't just get out of control and behind the quarterback and let him step up right in front of them. The same thing is true on punt return. And you had 3 guys, basically, that are responsible for, it's just like kickoff return. I mean, more people are familiar with kickoff return and lanes and all of that. You have certain responsibilities as a punt return, or as a punt team guy. One guy's going to be contained. One guy's going to be running the lane on the inside of that. You got another on the lane inside of that. And what you have to do is you have to find the returner, find where the ball's going to go. And you should have somebody where the punter is, after the punt is shouting, right, right. And you have some help in terms of that. But the bottom line is you find where the returner is and where he's catching the ball, and you never get behind that. The only time you ever get behind that is when you're trying to pin a team deep into the inside the 20, and there will be usually 2 guys that'll be responsible there, 1 or 2 guys depending on how you do it, who's going to be responsible if the punter is fair catching. Okay, he's probably distracting. Now I'm going to get behind him. But if he doesn't fair catch, you can't do it.
Yep.
If it's not a fair catch, your job is never to get behind him. You are slowing down and you are finding your way. If you're the contained guy, you get no more than, basically where he's just in front of you and you just keep your outside clean, and everybody else has to force to the ball. They didn't do that. You had 4 guys behind the ball when he right after he caught it. Well, at that point, it's 10 blockers in the returner against 7. Because the punter is not exactly he's not exactly what you'd call a tackler, right? So you're gonna win that battle on the punt return every time. That happened. The punt block was inexcusable. Right? You give up a punt return for a touchdown and a punt block, you're going to lose that game 90% of the time.
It is it's been,
that needs to be reassigned. That job needs to be reassigned. Whoever is coaching those units, and again, if Larry Porter as the special teams coordinator is the one that's actually overseeing the punt team, he needs to be reassigned. Somebody else needs to be doing that team. Maybe he can handle the other special teams or whatever, but whoever's doing that, that's got to change.
It is, and it just seems so simple to handle the special team side of it. Buck, let's get out of here on the dot on an hour. We will, just for viewing purposes and people watching this, and shout out to the almost 500 that are here, we will have a post-mortem at some point in the near future. Need to let some things shake out. We can talk about it. We'll have Buck and Jason and Greg Barnes and maybe some others on here. Have a round table to talk about the season as a whole, and changes and not changes and anything like that. Also, Shot and Vip show will drop tomorrow.
That's going to be fire.
That'll be interesting. So check out Taylor Viplis and Jeff Schottmer. And also, on the basketball side, Justin Jackson and John Bowman, Shooting It Straight, will drop later today. Jason, before I go to Buck for final thoughts, you got one more last thing on depth. somebody said in the special teams discussion, why not have starters playing? Well, I'd love to see a guy like Cedric Gray playing on punt return and things like that. When he's playing 100 snaps already on defense, you can't do it. But Jason, your take there?
Well, for one thing, in terms of depth, program depth, overall program depth, the guys that you have on your roster, having quality depth is going to be more important in, moving forward than ever because of how long seasons are in the 12-team playoff era. If you want to be a playoff team, if you want to get over the hump like Mac Brown has talked about, then the teams that are going to have a chance that late in the year after that many games and all of that are going to be teams that do a phenomenal job with load management. They're going to be teams that do a phenomenal job of developing their youngest and least experienced players to be in position to handle all of that well. And so that means you're going to need to play young guys on special teams. That means you're going to need to play backup linebackers and backup defensive linemen and backup offensive linemen over the course of the season. You have to. Because by the time you get into deep in November and if you make a playoff and look, it's way premature to talk about North Carolina getting close to the playoff at this point. But you make a playoff and now you're going to have some significant stuff that you're going to have to deal with there. You're going to have to have guys as fresh as possible going into that part of the season. So no, you can't focus on starters. You have to get your backups and your younger guys and all of that ready over the course of the season because it's going to be more important than ever moving forward to be fresh late in the year.
Interesting comments in the chat. As I said, we'll have a postmortem podcast where we'll more freely discuss the future rather than last night's game. But Buck, close us out of here. A lot of valid points, a lot of issues, a lot of things exposed repeatedly during the 2023 season. But sort of wrap it up for us, and then we'll come back later on down the line and let it loose.
Just a little bit of tidying up before we go. North Carolina had punts or kicks blocked by Georgia Tech, Pittsburgh, and Syracuse that I can find. Those are the conference teams. I don't know if they got a kick blocked by somebody else, non-conference or not. South Carolina didn't block one, even though they're very good at it. But that being out of the way, again, I think it's best to emphasize that this game that we just watched featured a North Carolina team that has not ever played together before as a group and will never play together again as a group next year. The spring game will look vastly different than the game we just watched. And, I've heard guys all week talk about this game, and, some people have even described it as, well, it's really more like a scrimmage, these bowl games these days because of the number of people that opt out for one reason or the other, or the transfer for a variety of reasons. So I don't think we can judge bowl games quite as well as we used to could. I think that's probably an accurate way of putting it. But don't get me wrong, I'd much rather be sitting here this morning talking about a North Carolina win than a North Carolina loss, regardless of what kind of game you can call it. So I think that's one of the takeaways from this, and I expect there to be a rolling series of news, which obviously we're going to cover at Inside Carolina extensively, about coaching goings and comings, and also transfer portal news and that sort of thing. And I totally understand why people are, and as we are, not exactly thrilled with the way this season went or any of the last three seasons went. I think there's something crazy like 2-12 down the stretch the last 3 years, something like that. I mean, it's just ridiculous the number of games North Carolina has lost down the stretch. Something we'll talk about in the postmortem more extensively. But that's a disheartening thing. And trust me, everybody that is an observer or a participant in UNC football is as upset about that as you are. So I'll just end with that.
Yep, it's an interesting discussion to be had in the days coming ahead. Like Buck says, Inside Carolina will be on top of every change. This transfer portal's still around, in and out. Coaching changes usually occur in January. If you followed this for a long time, Matt Brown talks about he doesn't know what to do to get over the hump. That's a troubling statement if you're a North Carolina football fan, given how that hump has turned into a mountain over the last 3 years. North Carolina finishes 8-5, loses to West Virginia in the Mayo Bowl. A lot of people in the chat. I want to give a shout out to Michelle, John Siegley, Joey, Buck, of course, Jason, Taylor Viplis, Ben Sherman, everybody at Inside Carolina that's helped on the football side of things. It's been a labor of love. And Jason Staples, go check out Jason on Amazon. I'll give you a shout out. You're going to send me a $100 check for this advertisement. Jason's got a book, and, it's a real world book. I need to read it to get educated. But anyway, shout out to Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity. Congruity is the place where all of you need to go for your small businesses. You go to congruityhr.com/Tar Heels. You get a free assessment. They'll push your small to mid-sized business over the top. They'll get you over that hump that Matt Brown can't seem to figure out. Congruity's got it in spades if you check them out. Customer service, technology, they grow your business. They take care of your people. They do all that stuff. It is a great way to start 2024 out with Matt and Darren and those guys at Congruity. Anything left, gentlemen? We are done. This is the last day after of 2023. We start strong and we kind of peter out with these at the end. We will figure out how to get over the hump. But Buck, I love you, man. It's been fun. Jason, it's always been great. Can't wait to the round table where it gets interesting as we go along.
Yeah, maybe we could bring up the how people did on their predictions this year. I'm curious.
Why would you want to go to that there, Buck?
I'm wondering how that all worked out.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know what you're talking about. If it's kind of like a receipt. If it happened 120 days ago, you can't take it back. And we don't
Buck
have.
doesn't want to take it back, from what I understand. So.
Well, my predictions are about as good as the last 3 seasons. So
at least you didn't go 12-0.
Yeah, that's next year.
Okay.
Oh, come on now.
All right, guys, it'll be fun to cover it. Stay tuned to Inside Carolina. Stay tuned to all the podcasts and everything coming up. Stay tuned to the website, the message boards, and all that. One thing about it, it's better to care and be fired up than not care at all. North Carolina fans, especially on Inside Carolina, certainly have all that covered as well.
I got to get my background for the next one up here.
Buck, Jason, we shall resume soon. Thanks to everybody.
All right. See y'all.
Thanks.
Thanks, Tommy.